Thank you for joining today's corporate housing hotline session. For today's topic, I would like to talk about how do you actually know if a market is actually worth your time. One of the things that we see quite often in the midterm rental space is whether or not their market actually fits for midterm rentals. The operator finds a city. Maybe they have family there, or perhaps they talk to someone, and at least on the short term side, it kind of feels like it might be a good market to also do midterm rentals. Maybe they had a pretty good feeling when they spoke with their realtor, essentially sold them on the city and the location, and the property might be a good fit. What ends up happening quite often is that once you actually go and buy the property or even sign the lease, you think everything is going to go according to plan. The first month, it's very slow. It doesn't really build up anything in terms of bookings. The second month is worse. Just by the third month, just start discounting and start listening everywhere and wondering where things went wrong. For this particular scenario, the property wasn't the problem, it was the market. And what I want to focus in this session is really how do you actually go about doing the market research and determine that there's actually demand for 30-day stays. For today's session, I want to make sure that we're building the habits of doing market research before you actually commit to actually buying or leasing your next property. And I'll show you the tools that we use inside Roadmap Login to ensure that you have that visibility. Now, I'll walk through basically at a high level what this looks like, and I'll also go through the tool to ensure that you have visibility in terms of what it will look like as well. Now, normally a lot of market research is spent doing hours of research, talking to a lot of people. Sometimes it could take hours, days, months, and sometimes not being able to have high quality information for it all and ends up having analysis paralysis. So I want to show you some of the tools that we use inside Roadmap Login to ensure that you have that confidence for you to be able to build a use case and ensure that you have confidence whenever you're thinking of buying your next property or renting your next apartment. So you should be able to see basically a PowerPoint slide. So I'll go through it at a high level. I'll go briefly over some of the information, and then also I'll show you the tool in particular as to what we're looking for in terms of market research and in terms of the information. But just in general, oftentimes when we think about market research, specifically for the short term rental space, it's not really something that's out there in terms of what midterm rental market research is, but I'll show you the contrast. Whenever we're thinking about putting a property out in the midterm or short term rental, a lot of times the emphasis is in AirDNA, comparing in Furnish Finder, also comparing Airbnb sometimes, applying different filters for you to be able to get comparables. The problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily give you actual demand from employers. It gives you information in general in regards to what short-term rentals are doing, or maybe some midterm rentals are doing, but it doesn't necessarily give you the information in regards to what actual employers are doing. It gives you a good understanding, more or less, in terms of high level demand, but particularly for tourists, not necessarily about employers. It doesn't also give you signals as to what are some of those indicators that you need to have to ensure that the particular market that you're choosing actually has economic development coming through and that employers are actually going into that workforce. Also, capacity and some other risk assessments that you need to take into account. Some of the things that we particularly look at is a current demand index, growth trends, utilization rates, risk factors, and then making sure that we have a good confidence level. And I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. So typically in the short-term rental side, you look at the numbers, they look pretty decent in paper. You feel like you might cash flow in terms of long term, if you're cash flowing a couple $100, or you might be projecting that perhaps your particular property might actually cash flow decently. So on paper, it kind of looks good. The other thing is that you have an operating lease, right? So you actually have secured something and you feel confident, at least based on the terms that the landlord has given you or the particular property that you have actually bought. And you feel like once it goes live, you put it up and people will come. The problem that we see is that quite often, if you're not doing your market research, specifically for 30 plus days and looking at specific regulations, is that perhaps the market might be good for short term, rentals for tourists, but not necessarily if you're looking for insurance relocation claim, construction projects, corporations actually coming in. So making sure that you have a good understanding the particular market and how you will play based on your particular investment strategy. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier, right now you're kind of thinking of, so I'm thinking you might have some confidence. You're started off with the first month, bookings start coming in. Afterwards, you start running out of capital. You're actually putting into your savings because there's no 30-day bookings. And the third month is really when you start to discount heavily. You start posting it everywhere. And then you wonder what actually went wrong. So if you would have done some of the market research ahead of time, that would have built some of the confidence before you actually decided to invest into any particular property for midterm. Oftentimes, what we see is that you start posting everywhere, you start discounting your property, and you start accepting short-term bookings, and which ultimately is not necessarily the strategy that we're trying to pursue. So we're trying to help you to ensure that you have a good understanding as to what it takes to really get into a professional level for in the corporate housing business. So we just want to make sure that you're not flying blind whenever you put these properties out there and you have invested thousands of dollars to get them ready. Now, whenever we're looking at market research, there's a lot of things that people should be looking into. But really, whenever you're just comparing AirDNA or Airbnb listings or Furnish Finder, you're pretty much looking at pretty high level. You're not really taking a look at employment information. You might be looking at some competition, but you're not really doing like SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, past analysis, which I'll walk you through in a little bit more. Making sure that you have good population growth, that people actually are moving into your particular location, wages, actual businesses coming into the area. All these things, what we'll do within the roadmap login operating system, and I'll show you how to get into that, is how do you can actually do all of this research within 60 seconds, within just one click of a button. A lot of time is being spent just taking a look at information, like I said, hours, sometimes weeks, months, just interviewing people, connecting with people. And so what we'll do is we'll actually give information that's derived from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the census, a lot of reliable information to ensure that you have a really good understanding of your local market and or even if it's outside your market, if you're looking to invest into a market that's aside from where you live, to make sure that you have a good understanding as to what's going on in that particular location. And all this research can be done within a couple of seconds, just as you go through that information. And so, really, when it comes down to high level, I'll go through this information and a little bit more, but really, you just want to make sure that you have your macros, meaning that you have a good understanding of is the actual population growing. In addition to that, you have a good pool of people coming into the area, making sure that workforce is growing, wages are growing. You also have a good understanding that more businesses are coming into the area, which ultimately drives competition, increases wages, and ensures that we have good packages for those employers that are providing the benefits to employees that are coming in, as well as higher wages. So this is what it looks like. Really, what the tool is within the online operating system. You're free to join as a host and create your account as a host. You get a 14-day free trial without any credit card or any information for all the investment tools. But the particular one that I want to talk about is this market research analysis. And I want to make sure I focus on this. There's other additional ones that you can take a look at, and there's additional information. Like if you want to take a look at the calculators and how do we go about underwriting our deals, all that information is there. But I want to focus in particular for the market research section. Now, for the market research, it's pretty simple. Really, what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at the city and the state in which we want to do this market research analysis. So for example, there's some very popular ones that we can just simply select from. All you need to do is just enter your city and the state in which you want to do business. Next, you just need to click on run analysis. This will do its thing. It's going to take a look at your local market data. It's going to take a look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's going to take a look at demand in terms of what you have. And so, as you can see here, there's a couple economic drivers for you to have a really good understanding. Now, unemployment rates, if you guys are familiar or maybe have heard on the news, an unemployment rate of 4% or less, it's really good. Typically, when we take a look at midterm rental markets, if we're seeing that the unemployment rate is 4 or higher, it means that either people are leaving that particular state or market, it means that people or companies are laying off individuals, it means that perhaps a lot of people are going without work. So we want to make sure that unemployment rate stays relatively low. Now, Nashville, Tennessee is a huge metropolis. A lot of the people that are there are working, and so there's very few people that are unemployed. Now, in this particular instance, when we compare it to same period prior year, it's actually gone down 0.03 percentage points. That this actually used to be at 3.1, which means that the unemployment is even less. The market is growing, things are happening in Asheville, and that's a really good city for you to do midterm rental. Now, in this particular score, it gives it an 82 out of 100. So, to give you a perspective in terms of what that gauge looks like, is that if this number is close to 70 or less, then this means that there's some kind of warning. There's no, there, this particular market may not be a really good fit for midterm. But if it's 70 to 80, it means that it's an okay market for you to do midterm. If it's 82 to 90, then it means that it's actually pretty good. If it's 90 and above, it's like you should be in that market. There's no question that you should be in that market. And so this gives you that gauge in terms of, is this at high level, this answers whether this particular market is good for midterm rental. It also has information in regards to the labor force. So, in particular for Nashville, is this market good in terms of labor? Is the trend in an upward trend? Are they actually growing? Same thing with wages. We can see here that year over year, it has grown about 3.1, which is a pretty healthy margin. Businesses have grown same period prior year by 2%. Typically, a growth of 1% is really good. Nashville is seeing a 2% increase year over year. Wages have gone up as well as population. So in general, unemployment rate being down is really good. It means more people are coming in, they're actually working, and they're contributing to the overall economy, which you can see here in this metrics here. It gives you additional information in regards to the overall score, and basically it tells you this is an excellent market, and these are some of the things that we're seeing. If you scroll down, there's 10 different research modules. In the very first section, it's basically going to tell you about Nashville and why is or it is not a good market for midterm rentals. It also will tell you what are some of the key employers that perhaps are seeing some of that growth. So, for example, HCA Healthcare is the largest employer with 35,000 employees, and they often hire travel nurses. It gives you a good opportunity in terms of what are some of the positioning that you should include, as well as what are some of the recommendations that they give you in terms of what are the potential properties that you could be using in terms of bathroom counts. Additionally, it's going to give you information in regards to the top employers. So Nashville is very big in healthcare. So as you can see here, it's got quite a bit of them, but it also has manufacturing, government, politics, public services, as well as others. So this will give you a really good insight in regards to what are the different industries that perhaps I should target. If my focus is a lot on logistics and transportation, perhaps there might be a better fit in terms of higher demand. So just also thinking about who it is that you want to target and who it is that you want to serve. If you go to market intelligence, it's actually going to give you additional information in detail in terms of what this particular market looks like. What are some of the potential risk factors? Which, if you're kind of familiar with Nashville, you'll notice that perhaps there's some seasonal demands. There's probably high taxes as well. So just for some other things for you to consider before you actually go and do business in this particular market. It gives you more or less a range as to what the prices will look like, and as well as what are some potential amenities that you might want to include within your property to give you a higher return on investment. The other thing that I really like about this is that you can actually run this and it's going to give you the Economic Development Corporation information in terms of news and stories that are happening within that particular market. If you're not familiar with the Economic Development Corporation, this particular corporation, what they do is they basically do a lot of work in order for them to be able to capture outside investment from corporations to ensure a lot of business are coming into the area and to ensure that there's growth within the city. They're funded either by the government, the county, or state taxes. So they're essentially trying to develop that additional business within that particular city. Now, in this particular one, it gives you some of potential projects like major capital projects that are happening in Nashville. In particular, there's seven that they have highlighted. So in this instance, what it's saying is that there's some Indus Commercial Center project happening. It actually gives you a link in regards to where you can actually get additional information. So this particular one comes from Morningstar. So you can click on here and read about that particular development. They're investing 2.5 million for a logistics park. Those are probably warehouses that they're building. So if there's a potential demand, this could be some really good project. And if you're thinking, Jorge, what particular projects are happening? This is research and opportunities that are happening live. They're currently active, and so it tells you what are some of the potential demand that you could have. So if your property is close to Lebanon, Tennessee, which is part of relatively close to Nashville, this perhaps might be a really good opportunity. There's a couple of them that you can see here. The Nashville International Airport is expanding, so that might be a really good opportunity. Amazon expansion, Starbucks, they're opening a new headquarter office in Nashville. They're investing $100 million. They're creating 2,000 jobs. So this would be a really good opportunity for you to be proactive and perhaps try to reach out to a couple of those individuals that are running those particular projects. And so, like I mentioned, here's a link to that. So, for example, the Starbucks news, right? So you can get additional information. You can even get in contact with the people that did the publication and just be like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more? I'm intrigued. Is there a way for me to connect with you and just understand more about the projects? So, just at high level, this will save you a lot of time, a lot of research from this perspective as well. The other thing that I would like to show you is that you can actually click on here and have a really good understanding as to what your potential competition might be. So, what this will do is it will actually take a look at Furnish Finder, Airbnb, VRBO, and some other listings just for you to have a really good understanding in regards to like who's my competition, how are they pricing themselves, what type of quality of furnishings. So it's going to do its thing. In particular, is looking in Nashville. It's going to give you essentially what the average nightly rate, what the occupancy rates are. So all those things that you would technically get from RDNA is being provided to you the additional subscription. Now, keep in mind, a lot of this information is public information. It's basically public listings that are out there. I do want to make sure that you're aware that you do need to actually verify those listings before you actually make any decisions as well. It's going to tell you how saturated it is. So Nashville is a big metropolitan location. It's definitely growing, but as you may know, it's very competitive. So if you don't want to be competing a whole lot, perhaps Nashville might not be a good fit for you. But if you aren't in terms of competition and you want to make sure that you have a good understanding in regards to the neighborhoods that you may want to explore, it will tell you all of that information. In addition to that, you can take a look at some of those listings. Some of this may have the link specifically to those listings. If it doesn't, it's going to have at least the name of those, so you can actually Google them and take a look at them and verify the information that's coming across. So here you can take a look at some of the listings, how they're pricing themselves, bedroom, bathroom counts, neighborhood, things like that. If I'm coming in and I'm gonna get a one bedroom, one bathroom, how is my competition pricing themselves? And I take a look at those and make sure that I have a good understanding of what my competition looks like in terms of comparables are in that particular market. The other section that I really like, and actually this one is a really good one. This one will give you additional detail as to why it is an 82. And it's gonna give you additional information in regards to those major employers, as well as the industries that you can connect with. Now, it's gonna give you a general information in terms of the phone number as well as the website. So you can do additional research if you feel like Maybe I need to contact someone at HCA Healthcare, Vanderbilt, Amazon Fulfillment Center. The other one that I really like is this employment heat map. Now, this is particularly helpful, at least it has been very helpful to us to understand where exactly should we go ahead and buy property. Now, keep in mind, you might have an employer, like say your house is like Laverne or Brentwood, and you might actually just have like Amazon Fulfillment Center, and that might be enough. But if you're thinking about making sure that your house or your apartment is booked all year round, you definitely want to consider in a way where you can get employers within the same location. I would imagine if you have something near Avenue or Church Street or somewhere in between here, or if there's an opportunity that comes up somewhere in between here, you could have an opportunity with HCA Healthcare. You could have the Alliance Bernstein, which is an insurance company, Vanderbilt. So if you have something within here, an opportunity that comes up, this will give you a really good insight where now you can target three different employers, perhaps even more, instead of just having one particular company to complete to provide housing for. Said it's going to give you additional information and additional insight, but I really like this heat map to ensure that you have visibility. If an opportunity comes in any particular section, that you're in between all those different employers, your particular location is for your apartment or home, and you can specifically target those particular employers. I also really like this one for you to understand not only what's happening in the last year over year, which we take a look earlier, but also what's happened in the last 5 years. Do we see that trend? As you can see here, for since 2020, the unemployment rate has steadily gone down in Nashville, which is really good. Just have gone up. Employment more or less has been steady. Businesses continue to come into the city. Medium household income has grown. Labor force is more or less stable. But also taking a look over the last 10 years. So in general, like I said, unemployment has gone down. It seems like it's coming up a little bit, but still steady. And as you can see, instead of taking a look at it year over year, now you can quickly take a look at this in 5 years, 10-year range. And if you're thinking of holding this particular property for a long term, it goes back all the way to 2011, right? So just making sure that you have a good understanding of what the overall trend has been happening with that particular city, and if you expect this trend to continue. The other thing that a lot of people don't necessarily think is what are some of my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and potential threats? Just making sure from a business perspective, where we are trying to understand what are some of the potential strengths within this particular market. Now, as you think through the information in terms of why should I invest in this particular market? Well, here's some really good things for you to consider as to why you should actually go ahead and invest and actually run your business in Nashville. Now, the other thing is, well, what are some of those weaknesses? What are some potential things that could potentially have an impact on my overall profitability? You have an oversupply, maybe acquisition cost might be high. Is it worth your while to invest that much money for maybe not as much return on investment? Having a good understanding of seasonality, property taxes, is something that could go up. So all these things are things for you to consider before you actually make a decision. There's also opportunity, right? What are some of the things that are happening as to why it might be worthwhile for us to reconsider these weaknesses, and as to why it makes sense for us to still, even though there might be some risk, for us to continue to invest in these particular sections. And then threat, making sure that they have a good understanding of potential regulations, especially for short term, potential downturns, emerging new competitors, things like that. So things for you to actually consider before you invest into anything. Now, the other one is that not a lot of people talk about is the PES analysis. Now, PES stands for politics, economic, social, and technology. So having a good understanding as to what's happening locally politically can also have an influence in regards to whether it makes sense for you to do short term or even midterm mental. Making sure that you have a good understanding not only at the macro level but also on the local level if this is something that makes sense. In addition to that, making sure that you have a good understanding of what's happening with the social aspect in terms of population growth, lifestyle, and things for you to consider, and as to what's the potential impact of incoming technology that could potentially have an impact in that particular market. So All these things are things for you to consider and things that perhaps you wouldn't have thought otherwise, or maybe it would have taken you a long time to discover them. So just having a tool like this that can give it to you and for you to actually ponder and think about those particular things, so whether you should consider investing into midterm in that particular market. The other thing I know a lot of people spend a lot of time researching is whether or not there's potential regulations that are happening within their particular market. Is this something that's MTR friendly or not in terms of regulations? In general, there is, for example, for Nashville, there's some moderate risk, and it's going to tell you why. Typically, at least for over 30 days, there's not particular regulations that would be affecting it, as opposed to short-term rental regulations. And so, in this instance, for Nashville, there's five in particular ones, which is that you need to have a permit. You have an owner-occupied term rental, for example, owner-occupied. So you need to make sure you have a permit for that. You need to consider hotel occupancy tax, occupancy limits, noise and waste management. So those are some of the things, as well as what are some of the legislations like that is potentially coming across, making sure as to what's happening with that particular city. If you need to contact someone in terms of code and building safety department, the finance department, it's going to give you some information as well as some websites that you can actually reach out to and connect with. And then the other thing is like ensure that you have a good checklist. If you're considering doing a hybrid model where you do short term and midterm rental strategy, that you need to ensure that your fees would be. You need to ensure that you collect and remit those taxes and ensure that you have everything that you will need to be successful before you actually buy that property or you actually end up signing the lease. We want to make sure that you're in compliance, you're professional, and we don't want you to invest thousands and thousands of dollars just for you to find out that you actually needed a permit and then all of a sudden your listing is going to get shut down. So just with this alone, just find out the regulations. It might be worth your while to actually create the house account. Like I said, it's a 14-day free trial. You can sign up to your house account. There's no credit card required. And you can go ahead and enjoy this. Take a look at your market, see if there's any potential regulations that are coming across for you to also consider. At the end, as to who is local in your market that could actually help you build this business. A really good resource, at least for us, in terms of how we've grown our business, is in terms of our local Chamber of Commerce. You can take a look here. You can actually go to their website and it's going to give you information in regards to what it is that they do, the membership, what all that looks like, as well as someone that you could possibly contact. In addition to that, it's going to give you resources in terms of not only the chamber, but also ways that you can network locally that can actually help you develop your business for free. That's a little bit more local, as well as some additional information. It's going to have some news, some trends, as well as some events that are happening in the next couple of weeks. Right now is June 3rd, as the time of this recording. The Nashville Business Expo is coming up on June 15th, as well as the Real Tennessee Conference, which is happening in July 10th. So you want to make sure they have information to those. Now within seconds, you can actually run this analysis and take a look at the information. And you can quickly come and take a look at the analysis that you've run within seconds, making sure that you have an analysis as to what's happening as well in different markets. So you can play around with this, see what information it gives you. There might be a really good market that perhaps is over 90%. And I would definitely encourage you to go and take a look deeper into those markets and see if those might actually be good markets for you to actually deep dive on and have that information. Making sure that you have a good understanding of your labor force, making sure that you have a good understanding of what wages are doing, and making sure that those individuals can actually afford your place. What we want to do ultimately, and we'll go ahead and finish up the session, is making sure that you have a good framework in terms of what all this information has to ultimately become a scoring algorithm and for ultimately for you to be able to decide, is this a go or no go market for me to actually spend time and invest in that particular market. The main thing that I would like you guys to do in terms of as your actual market research and you're utilizing the tool is that we want to make sure that you have a framework in regards to actually making that decision. We talk about different metrics, so employment, labor force, wages, spend in business, and then income and population trending. Um, So take a look at your market and and we'll go ahead and use this scoring system to ensure, is this market perhaps something that's actually a good market for MTR, or is this not a good market potentially for MTR? And the way that this works is that as you do your market research, basically, if, for example, for low unemployment, like I said, it needs to be less than 4%. If, for example, it's 2% or 2.8, like how we saw for Nashville, then this is going to be a strong signal. If it's perhaps like a 3.5, then, moderate signal, more or less kind of shrinking around that 4%. Obviously, if it's 4% or more, then this would be a very weak signal. And so that's the way we'll go ahead and talk about this scorecard in terms of those five different metrics. If you have a population that's growing, like I said, usually 1% is really good. So as long as it's above 1%, it's like a strong signal. If it's 0.5, if it's going down, it's trending outwards, then it might be a week. As you tally it, all this information, the maximum score that you can have is 10 points. And this is essentially what we're looking at, right? When we're making a decision, if overall in your market, your score 8 to 10, then this is strong signals. You can actually move forward with that acquisition. If you fall within 5 to 7 in that particular market, this is something that has mid signals. It might actually work for midterm, but you actually need to dig deeper. You need to actually take a look at the SWOT analysis, pest analysis, regulations, all those different things to make sure you have that really good understanding as to what's happening before you make a decision. And then if it's a 0 to 4, don't even waste your time. You don't have a population, which businesses aren't coming to the area, then perhaps it might not be a good area. Even though sometimes we see on Facebook or social media that people are actually very successful in the short-term rental side, perhaps there might be more on the touristy side as opposed to midterm rentals. So if you're looking specifically for midterm rentals, then perhaps that market not be a good fit. So, like I said, just making sure that you use those signals, right? A lot of people spend a lot of time looking at RDNA, Furnish Finder, Airbnb, all those things, and they're confusing tourist demand. What we're looking at specifically with this tool is actually corporate demand from actual businesses and from information that's actually coming from reliable resource like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, census, as well as other resources that are very reliable, like the local chamber, the economic development corporations, as well as other resources that we take a look at. Ultimately, what we're trying to do, if you guys think about how Chick-fil-A decides where they want to put their net, this is exactly the information that they're looking at. They're not guessing, it's not feeling anything like that. They're doing all this research, they're spending thousands and thousands on consultants to make sure that when they decide to move forward with that location, it actually makes sense business wise. Not only you're not looking specifically at one metric and, oh, this is like a good market. You actually have a good understanding as to how those different metrics relate to each other. And even though the unemployment rate might be going down, perhaps your labor force is actually plummeting. Perhaps your work in. And even though the unemployment rate is going down, perhaps that might be because there's no more jobs that are coming in and people are actually fulfilling those jobs are. So, and as to how those different metrics relate to each other and how they kind of intertwine the overall market analysis as well. So just to finish off, you want to make sure that this isn't just a gut feeling. Right? This isn't something that kind of works on that you have a high level understanding of AirDNA's information, Furnish Finder, and those high level comparables. You really want to make sure you're not blindsided. Ultimately, the tool will give information within 60 seconds and now for you to be able to make a decision. Go through your scorecard as to whether or not that particular market might actually be a good fit. But ultimately, if you feel like there's mid signals, you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself. And like I said, take a look at different markets. You can compare Indianapolis versus Nashville versus Charlotte versus Austin, several different ones. So take a look at what those different markets are doing, how the different trends kind of look against each other. So just to finish off the call, like I said, go ahead and go to romablodging.com and open or create your host account. Open the markets module. Once you're in there, go ahead and click on or select the city and state that you want to do the analysis, and then just go through your scorecard. Is this a go market? Is this perhaps something that to be cautious, or is this a no go? And share it within the community. We want to hear from you and make sure that you have actually play around with this and give us a score. Did you thought perhaps at the market that you're in might be a really good MTR market? And after you're actually going through this, did you find out that perhaps may not be? I want you guys to share it within the community. Share with us, share with the group, and let us know what you find out. With that, I'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you in the next one.